Morning team, I'm Alex Milway, writer of books about Yetis, The Magma Conspiracy, new one out in July. Here goes, first chapter. The winter wind blew hard and cold across Antarctica as a snowstorm raged, making passage across the Ross ice shelf impossible for a human. For a Yeti, however, it was a walk in the park. "It's nice and warm today," said Tsar, loosening the scarf around his neck. "It's almost a shame we're on a mission." "I'm worried about Timonen though," said Albrecht. "I knew it was a bad idea letting him walk off by himself." "Timonen only cares about his belly," replied Tsar. "Well, he's not going to find much to eat out there," said Albrecht, "unless he wants ice cubes for breakfast." He rubbed a clump of hardened snow from his eyebrows and looked through his binoculars. The orange glow of McMurdo ice station shone out like a beacon in the storm. "If he doesn't hurry up," said Albrecht, "I might have to have a few words with him." "If you write those words on his eyeballs, they may sink in," said Tsar, and with each step aided by the staff of ages, the wise Yeti trudged on with a smile across his face. "If only all days were like this," he said. Albrecht was about to reply when something caught his attention. He stopped briefly. He peered into the darkness, sniffed the air and rubbed his ears. "Can you hear a grumbling sound?" he asked. Tsar pushed the fur from his ears and listened closely to the howling wind. "I can," he said. "It's getting louder." "And closer," said Albrecht. He paused. Moments later, a giant snowball blasted straight into the two surprised Yetis. They vanished into its tumbling, icy heart, rolling across the ice sheet at incredible speed. "Wah!" cried Albrecht, spinning over and over like a giant furry rug in an enormous washing machine. "Hold on!" shouted Tsar. "I feel sick!" cried Albrecht. The snowball hit a ridge of volcanic rock and soared into the air like a meteor before crashing down in the centre of McMurdo Ice Station. Snow and Yetis flew everywhere. "Albrecht," sputtered Tsar, "would you please take your foot off my face?" Albrecht coughed and spat out a mouthful of snow. "I was going to ask you to do the same," he said. "But my feet are nowhere near." Both Yetis fell silent. "Morning," said Timonen. The huge Yeti groaned as he forced himself onto his feet. His eyes were swimming in their sockets. "Oh, quite a ride," he said, stepping back drunkenly. "Where are we?" "You," said Tsar. "You always get us into trouble." "Wait a minute," said Timonen, rubbing his eyes. "I didn't plan this." "That's the problem," said Tsar. "You never plan anything. It's lucky for us there's a snowstorm and all the humans are tucked away indoors." Now, let's not argue," said Albrecht, rising to his feet and brushing his fur free of snow. "We need to find our contact before the storm clears." He switched on his roar to access a map of the area. "This way," he said, and set off through the snowy streets. Tsar pulled himself upright and marched after him. Timonen brought up the rear. Who is it we're meeting?" asked Timonen. "Were you listening to a word Albrecht said at the briefing?" said Tsar. "Of course not," said Timonen. "I was hungry." "That's it," said Tsar. "Don't speak to me again." "Really?" said Timonen. "Please tell me you really mean it." "I mean it," he replied angrily. "Wonderful," said Timonen. "I'll talk to Albrecht instead. Where are we going?" "We're delivering a package to a scientist," he said wearily. "Will this scientist have food?" said Timonen. "I assume so," said Albrecht. "That's all I need to know," said Timonen. "Just show me the way." As the Yetis navigated the wide, snowbound streets, they could see the tips of snowmobiles poking out of the snow beside each building. They passed a series of huge dome-like containers and then came to a much smaller blue structure, which resembled an aircraft hangar. "That's the place," said Albrecht, pointing to it. He strode to the door and scooped away the pile of snow that blocked the entrance. Albrecht pressed a red button on the keypad labelled Intercom, and, after a moment's pause, a squeaky voice crackled out of a speaker. "Who is it?" said the voice. This had better be important. I'm not coming out there in this weather just for anyone. Right, stuttered Albrecht, remembering his code name. It's Snowman Alpha, with Snowman Beta and Gamma. Oh, replied the voice. Now that changes everything. Just give me a second to gear up. Albrecht looked puzzled. Do you know who this person is? asked Tsar. No idea, said Albrecht. All I know is he's a top-secret Legends operative. After a short wait, the Yetis heard a quiet clunk, which seemed to come from the direction of Albrecht's knees. They looked down. A very small hatch had opened at the base of the door. My, you're huge, said a tiny man who'd appeared at Albrecht's feet. He was wrapped in thick, weatherproof gear, and his only defining features were a rosy red face and a large nose that burst forth from his hood. And he's never going to fit through the door. The little man continued, pointing to Timonen. A mouse wouldn't fit through that door, said Timonen. The man grew angry and clenched his fists. If you're going to be rude, you can stay out here in the freezing cold. Like I'm bothered, said Timonen. That'll do, said Albrecht. He knelt down and lowered his head to the floor to look at the man, eye to eye. We've brought you a special package. The man's expression changed in an instant to one of glee. He rubbed his gloved hands and dashed off through the door. Don't just stand here, he said. He shouted over his shoulder. So, come in, you come in. Albrecht looked at Tsar, who looked at Timonen, who looked at the impossibly small door the man had disappeared through. Through there, said Tsar. Seconds later, the larger main door opened with a loud clang. Hurry up, the snow's getting in, said the man. It was still a squeeze, but with much holding of breath, the three Yetis made it through the entrance and the door sealed shut behind them. The warmth hit them immediately, as did the sight before them. It's like Santa's grotto, said Timonen. The Yetis were standing at the edge of a sprawling miniature laboratory. Platforms led off from the main walkway, joined by stairwells made for tiny feet. The building was packed with tiny scientific equipment and tiny computers, all operated by a team of tiny people. Machines ticked away in the background, LEDs flashed on and off, and strange liquid bubbled in glass jars. Take a seat, said the man, directing them towards a set of chairs perfect for a Yeti-sized doll's house. No, said Timonen to Albrecht Timonen, who was about to demolish one with his little finger. Use your brain. What a ridiculous thing to say, muttered Tsar. So where is it? Asked the little man, ignoring the bickering. Albrecht unstrapped his backpack and withdrew a small metal tin, no larger than a matchbox. He passed it to the man. Excuse my ignorance, said Tsar. Are you a gnome? Of course, he said, placing the tin on the table. I'm Grubchuk, a secret operative of the mythical 7th Division. But if you tell anyone, I'll have to silence you. Oh, scary, said Timonen. See this, Yeti, said Grubchuk, stretching over the table and picking up a gnome-sized jug of brown liquid. This will burn a hole through steel, he said. Imagine what it'll do to your feet. Timonen wisely retreated. I'm pretty sure that smells like coffee, whispered Tsar to Albrecht, but he doesn't need to know. Grubchuk opened the tin and his eyes glowed with excitement. He held its contents aloft. It was a square computer cartridge. Finally, I can log on to the mainframe, he said, disappearing behind a bank of computers. Timonen yawned with boredom. The computers eventually booted up, revealing an image of a globe crisscrossed by bright lights. With the new software, I'll be able to access all Legends databases from the comfort of my own lab, said Grubchuk, reappearing by Albrecht's feet. We came all this way for that, said Timonen. Are you always this stupid, said Grubchuk. Do you know what would happen if this fell into enemy hands? Watch! He typed a few commands into a computer, and the screens flashed up live shots of the Yowies of the mythical 5th Division. Grubchuk had tapped into surveillance cameras in Blue Base Canteen. Hey, said Albrecht, that's Cobb. He's eating a burger. Don't remind me of those, said Timonen. That's amazing, said Tsar. So you can interact with all the divisions now. Exactly, said Grubchuk. All my data and findings can be accessed by everyone else. We're one big family. There's nothing big about you, said Timonen. Remember, hot, burning acid melting through your feet, said Grubchuck. Timnon fell silent. So what do you gnomes do here? Asked Albrecht. We keep an eye on the environment, said Grubchuck. We monitor changes in the climate and weather systems, as well as tectonic plate movements and volcanic emissions. The gnome continued to test out the new capabilities of his computer. He ran through reams of data, scanned through photos of tropical creatures, and then chanced upon some schematics of an alien spacecraft. Ooh, he said. Nice. So how is the environment these days then? Said Tsar. Doomed, said Grubchuck. He was about to launch into an explanation when a gnome appeared at the end of the walkway, running towards them fast. Emergency! He gasped as he dragged Grubchuck away by the arm. Stay where you are, Grubchuck shouted to the Yetis. He rushed down the walkway and scooted up a different flight of stairs to meet a group of gnomes huddled in front of the monitor. Looks serious, said Tsar, watching from afar. Within a minute, Grubchuck was back. Our underground monitors show there's a disturbance in the Terra Rift, he said. This snowstorm has impeded our cameras, but I'm almost certain that Mount Erebus is erupting. The volcano, said Albrecht. We're not directly in danger, said Grubchuck, but it may disrupt your journey home. Another gnome rushed to Grubchuck's side. Sir, I've just heard there's a research team still out at Erebus, she said. If they aren't rescued quickly, they won't stand a chance. Oh, but we can't do anything in these conditions, said Grubchuck. It would take us weeks to navigate the snow with our legs. Are there many in the team? Asked Albrecht. 10, maybe 20, said the gnome. Well, it sounds like we should go and help, said Tsar. Well, you're certainly much better built for these emergencies, said Grubchuck, but it would be incredibly dangerous. Timon patted Albrecht on the back, winding him. Come on, he said. I've never seen a volcano erupt. All right, yeah, said Albrecht, coughing. Yeah, let's do it. First things first, though, said Timon. I need to eat. What have you got, gnome? Grubchuck looked at the massive Yeti and retrieved a tiny sandwich from a vending machine. Here you go, said the gnome, laughing. Rations are short. Timon picked up the sandwich between his thumb and his forefinger. It was the size of a penny at best. You call that a sandwich, he said. I call that a crumb. Not only do you have a cavernous mouth, said Grubchuck, but it's obvious you have a cavernous stomach too. Timon stomped to the door. Oh, open up, he said angrily. I'll get a warmer welcome from that volcano than I'll get here. Thank you, team. Go Yetis.